meeting for Monday, November 6, 2017, will please come to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell. Here. Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Present. Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Strawn. Mr. Strawn is absent at the moment. Council President Brady.
Here.
There's a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment related to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we're going to go to the matter referred to the committee, Resolution 2017-0182. Please read the item into the record.
Resolution number 2017-0182, adopting the 2018-2019 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's now before us. And the first item is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And Ms. Maggie Keenan, our OBM director, is going to present on behalf of the monument.
Good afternoon, Maggie Keenan, OBM. I do have Tim's remarks from last week, so I'll give those to Jean so that you have them. That has more detail on the monument's activities. For 2018 and 2019, the budget for the monument is projected to total $211,000 and $216,000 respectively. They are exclusively general fund supported. This is a slight increase over the 2017 estimate, and the increase is almost exclusively in the hospitalization line. Any questions?
Am I correct that the monument doesn't have any issues or concerns with their budget?
No, they don't.
Okay. Any questions by my colleagues? Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair, are they losing anything, any cuts being made?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. That was easy. Next item is the Soil and Conservation District. I don't see Ms. Ribka here. Do we know? Does anyone know if she's going to make it today? I'll give her a call. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to then go on to the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, Mr. Glenn Coyne.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Glenn Coyne, Executive Director of County Planning Commission. I have a very brief, I think 7 slides to run through, just to let you know where we are and what we're up to with the budget. Again, our mission statement is pretty clear to help not only the county as a whole, but each of the communities that we've been fortunate enough to help with planning and economic development. Our board, I just wanted to remind you, we have 11-member board. Through appointments from the executive and yourselves, we have these members approved by you, the council. 2 of your own are on our board, very active, and we have really great participation from all the mayors that we have on our board. So just wanted to give them a thank you. Our overall budget for 2018 is $1.7 million. Most of that is personnel costs. We have 20 FTEs. We are operating on a consulting model, which means that beginning a couple of years ago, our general fund subsidy became fixed, which meant that as we add outside revenue, that allows us, that's our future growth. So in other words, we're pretty well fixed with the revenue that we're getting, the general fund subsidy we're getting, and then any new work we bring in on contracts, that's our growth, if we have any. So we've been, our target for the next 2 years is 20%. In other words, we're going to bring in 20% of our budget with outside revenue to enhance the general fund subsidy from the county. This is a historical chart that just shows you how we've been doing since 2013 with our general fund and our outside revenue. And as you can see, we've gone from 13% up to 22, than 25, and we've been averaging around 22% for outside revenue over the past 5-6 years. So our budgets looking ahead 2 years are going to continue that goal. Again, this is just a restatement. We're happy with the budget as presented, and we're going to continue along with the appreciation of the fixed subsidy. There's one component of the budget that I wanted to bring to your attention that we have 2 minor concerns with. This year, our $1.3 million general fund subsidy is mostly just general funds, but this year the proposal from the budget office was to put $500,000 from the Roads and Bridges Fund. And that's okay. We do a lot of work with Public Works. We have a great partnership with them. They're right next door to us. But we're just concerned that that amount takes away a little bit of our autonomy. 500,000 out of 1.7 million is quite a chunk. And then more importantly, though, we're just concerned about the sustainability of those funds in future years. In other words, if future councils say, we want to use Roads and Bridges funds for roads and bridges, sorry, Planning Commission, you got to come up with your 500,000 somewhere else. We're, as planners, looking ahead to that day and would not like that to happen. So other than that, we have no major policy changes planned, policy changes anticipated for next year. We're going to continue our master planning program where we have a grant program for up to $150,000 for cities to do master plans. That's averaging about 4 a year. And we're going to continue our countywide and regional planning efforts. So we're not adding any people. We've had 3 retirements this year, which is a lot for a staff of 20. And any folks we bring in, we'll bring them in at the technical and professional and support staff level, not at higher levels. We're promoting up from within for the most part. So no additional FTEs for us. So with that being said, we just appreciate, again, the fixed subsidy. It helps us to plan for how we're going to use our increased revenue. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing down at county planning. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Our budget person in our office is Jennifer Carafa. She was going to be here today, but lost power in the storm last night, and their kids are out of school, so she wasn't able to be here.
Director, on the master plans, is it 4 times 150,000, or is it a total of 150,000 for the 4 master plans?
The latter. It's 150,000, and then we spread that across 4 communities.
Okay, 150 total. Mm-hmm. Questions by my colleagues for the Planning Commission? Okay. Can you get us copies of the presentation?
Hopefully you got it last Monday. It should be, you should already have it. I brought copies last week.
Okay, so, Jean, do you have the online version?
I believe we do. We'll send
Okay.
that out.
Okay, so Jean will send the online version around, and the paper version was circulated at the last meeting. And we have a late question.
Thank you, I
That's
appreciate it.
permitted.
Sorry, I'm
Ms.
trying
Baker.
to read and understand at the same time. The 500,000 in general fund subsidy for replace with bridge and road funds, just so I understand, is that saying that the 1.3 million that you have, 500,000 of that is automatically going to go towards bridge and roads and bridge funds? Is that how that works, or?
No, right now, this year we got 1.3 million in general fund.
Right,
And this year, 500,000 of that
Right.
1.3 would come out of the Roads and Bridges Fund. And we'd still get 1.3. We'd still get the same amount. It's just that the source of the money is being split between general fund and Roads and Bridges Fund.
and just to follow, does that roads and bridge fund of 500,000 then have to be spent on roads and bridge? Is that where you feel you're limited, or?
I'm not really sure the answer to that question. The state Ohio Revised Code allows that money to be spent on roads, bridges, improvements, and planning for the same. And we do a lot of plans, and we usually talk about transportation quite a bit. So I think it meets the spirit of that law, but I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to guess on that. But it's more so a concern that that's administered through the Public Works Department. And, you know, the Public Works Department could say, well, we have 500,000 of your $1.3 million budget. What are you doing for us today? So right now, we don't have that. We don't have that situation.
May I follow, just
Yes, you may.
final? So in your 1.3 million that you generally have in that budget, is 500,000 an unrealistic number that would probably go to road and bridge funds?
In my opinion, yes.
Yes.
You know, and I would say that there would be a number that would be more appropriate, a percentage, but that seemed to us at least to be a little bit high.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a question. This would be to the law department as to what extent would the planning commission be required to document how much of this money is actually being used on road and bridge related stuff in order for this money to be used for that purpose?
I understand the question, Mr. Chair, and will provide you a response.
Okay, fine. Other questions by my colleagues? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And I'd like to note that council members Schwan and Jones have joined the meeting. Thank you very much. And next we have Department of Public Works, Director Dever.
Good afternoon, members of council. Michael Dever with the Department of Public Works. Pleased to be before you today to present the 2018 and 19 budget for the department. I just have some general comments, and then I'm sure that there's plenty of questions to come from the council in regards to my budget. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share with you the 2018 general budget for Public Works. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize the men and women of our department, from our facilities group, our engineering group, our roads and bridge engineering group, our sanitary group, our kennel, county airport. Obviously, it's a diverse group, but we have a lot of hardworking people that serve the county on each and every day. As you know, the Public Works Department encompasses a diverse group of activities, and I'll briefly address each of the main budgets within the department. Facilities is made up of over 300 people. Their budget for this year is going to be $49,504,120. The custodial services branch of that is 127 people. The building trades make up 98. Currently, we have temporary trades on staff of 19 currently. Mailroom is 11 people. The print shop, 7. Design and construction is 24. Archives is 5. The HPG garage is down to 6. Fleet is at 7. And property management is at 2. The road and bridge is made up of 130 people. That budget is $47,359,091. There's 77 people in the design, planning, construction, and fiscal arm of the road and bridge, or the former county engineer. Our maintenance services team makes up 53 people. Sanitary sewer services, 128 people at $19,038,642. That's engineering, fiscal, and maintenance. The county airport, these are the minor departments. County airport is made up of 9 people, and that budget is $1,587,670. The animal shelter, 16 people work within that department. That's $2,098,690. That's just a brief overview, and I'm sure that you've read the narrative within your budget books, so I'm here to answer any questions you may have for me.
Questions and comments by my colleagues? I'll start by asking, whether there's any reductions or changes. And I know that the reduction relating to facilities is in your budget, so if you could give us a little more detail on how realistic you think that is and how you think that's going to be achieved.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So there's a reduction of $1,050,000 that's associated with the facilities group. As many of you may have known, that we've gone through some energy efficiency improvements over the last number of years in public works and various buildings under the guise of House Bill 300 a few years back. So we believe that we're going to see some utility savings in this coming budget cycle to reflect that. Also, we're going to be looking at some alternative procurement methods. And we're anticipating some of our service contracts, specifically for the vertical services or the elevator contract. We're going to do a reverse auction in regards to that. And there's really only 3 or 4 primary outfits that can handle elevators. And we believe that we're going to see some substantial savings once we go through that reverse auction. Those are the primary items, Mr. Chair.
And Director, how much is the projected savings on the alternative procurement?
$350,000 is the intent to come out of the department, and I'm fairly certain that the budget director referenced that in her comments.
Right. So that's in addition, that's a separate category from the facilities reductions, am I correct?
Same budget, I'm sorry. Did I answer that question correct?
So as I recall, there was one category. There was one category for facilities, and there was another category for the procurement changes. I thought it was 2 different categories. Am I mistaken about that?
I'm not sure, Mike.
It is 2 different categories, but it ultimately comes out of that massive amount of money. So like the director was saying, you know, the total's gonna be $1,050,000, and we're gonna try to utilize a reverse auction. We also have done another thing where, you know, special projects used to be considered part of space maintenance. We anticipate saving so far this year, I think we saved over $300,000 in billing the customers directly on those. So if you don't like the color of this room and you want to change that, that's no longer part of space maintenance, because why should everybody else be paying for your room color? So we were very successful in 2016 and early 17 in direct billing people for those special projects. And so that's how we're also going to make up that $1,050,000. But it's all one big budget. Even though the other one came out of custodial, it's still basically our facility maintenance, our space maintenance fund.
Other questions, Councilman Tron, followed by Conwell and Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reverse auction, where did that idea originate from?
From the innovation group. Ultimately, that's where it started. Once I think.
So tell me, I mean, it doesn't start from a group. It starts from more than likely an individual?
I think it was, unfortunately, I can't speak to it. And our actually procurement staff within the Department of Public Works, we're trying to look for innovative ways to competitively bid all of our projects and look for cost savings. And unfortunately, the one procurement officer isn't with us today, but maybe you could talk about what was brought up in Board of Control today about how the savings we see from some of these contracts we put out, Mike.
No, truth be told, and we'll get into that as well, but we chose to start with elevators. It's one of our bigger ones. You know, we saw a presentation on how there's a lot of success with these reverse auctions, and we thought we'd start off with our elevators. We have other commodities, you know, custodial items, garbage bags, toilet paper, things like that we can certainly try and see where it's going to come with these reverse auctions. Our elevator's the biggest one. I think it goes around, I think $800,000 or $900,000 is our contract. So even if we see a 10% savings there or whatever, we're hoping that we can start multiplying that to our other contracts. Today's Board of Control, we did come up with some alternative procurement processes to try and go ahead and award, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, doors and locks. We're trying to go out and bid everything we can. But in addition to just doing the normal competitive process, we felt that this reverse auction had some potential, and we're gonna give it a try.
And where do have you studied any of these things, reverse auctions out there?
No, it was brought to our attention through the innovation group, specifically Scott Rourke's team.
Okay, so that's where it started from, Scott. That's what I was just trying to get.
Sure.
And his success with this has been what? Do you have any idea? Because I've looked at reverse auctions, and sometimes it can be real disastrous for people in your field because of the fact. Well, just go through. I'm sure by the fact you're nodding your head, you must have some concerns about reverse auctions also.
Well, that's right, and that's why we're taking a little bit of a chance in regards to this. And when I spoke to the OBM director, that if we can't see this savings of $350,000, I'm going to need to identify it elsewhere within Public Works to make up that shortfall that we may not see. So I'll prepare myself for that, and the hope is I'm not coming back before this council for additional appropriation for one of my items.
Well, the money is the one component, but the other component is you indicated you have very few number of options as far as people quoting elevators, I assume?
Yeah,
It's not a large pool of people, I'd be willing to bet, that can do that function here in town.
Right. There's actually, it's probably over the Midwest. There's ThyssenKrupp, Otis, Schindler are some of the primary vertical transportation, which includes escalators at the Justice Center. So it is a small pool, but the idea is a reverse auctions as people see each other's bids all the way up to the last minute, and then in turn, people continue to kind of sharpen their pencil as you get to the deadline of those that item being due.
Or they walk away from the table saying, this is not my cup of tea.
True.
And now, with only 2 or 3 bidders, your competitive process has a risk. If you read what a lot of the big automobile companies did in this very area, bidders said, heck with it, we don't want to be involved with that. We're going to walk away from the table. We'll leave you guys to get down to only 1 or 2 bidders, and now we really are not going to see potentially the gains that you were hoping for. So I really want to wave a red flag that this has its share of potential risks. On the flip side of it, the bidders will say, no, we don't want to be stuck in the middle of that. That's crazy out there.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've seen that in the case studies out there.
Yeah.
At
the same time, if we feel we've got the historical averages of what those are, I mean, the number of elevators or escalators that for the county has been pretty stagnant. I mean, it's 55 units altogether is what we're responsible for. So we have historical information on what they are, considering a 2% increase or COLA or inflationary increase. So if it seems like those bids come back and those numbers seem like they're skewed, I'd be prepared to pull this back and maybe reevaluate that before making any type of award also.
Yeah, 'cause you're limited to, like you say, Schindler, ThyssenKrupp, Otis, and probably those are the players. And
Yeah.
it just seems to me that long-term contracts will get you a better result than you will trying to get into stuff like this. But this is kind of cutesy bidding as opposed to what I find to be serious bidding. So that's what I wave that red flag to you, because you don't want to drive vendors off the table. Once that happens, then your bidding process really does get to be a lot tougher. If you only have one guy at the table, then you're not going to get the best bid.
We chose elevators too because the company that showed us the presentation showed there was great success. I think their bids were like 25% lower.
Good.
So that was why we chose that one to start with, because we obviously have elevators, and it was actually the timing of it all. Our elevator contract, we just amended it for 6 months, and so the timing's right for that.
Is this
But
a
as the director
consultant?
said-
Is this a
Sorry.
consultant that's helping us put these bids together?
We're putting the bids together, and we're all doing that ourselves. We're continuing the same process we always did. We're gonna put it out, and then, and I'm working with law on this as well, but I guess when they come back in, there's no prices. Everything's done, and then it gets turned over to the consultant, and I'll have to refer to Scott on that, and then that's how they start the auction. But we do everything like we used to do. but we don't sit there and they don't submit prices. So they can see everything, the elevators, the number, the locations and all that.
So there's a consultant some point along the way again in this process?
I believe that's part of their business is to conduct the auction themselves. So I don't know how they're gonna get paid out of this, and that's something I'll have to talk to Scott. But, what I saw in the beginning was 25% savings, and it happened to be in the millions because it was very big. I think it was the state that did it. So we thought, well, let's try that as our first one.
So there'll be a fee, I assume, associated with the consultant to run the auction like any auction?
I would assume there is too.
And that'll go on top of the savings, so it'll eliminate part of the savings?
Yeah, but if it's 25%, I'm hoping at least we get to 10. I mean, that could be almost 100 grand right there, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to, being on the Budget and Finance Committee, we'd love to see that come back to us and see so give us the details of how it all works out.
Absolutely, sure.
Blow by blow and including whatever the consultant is going to make on this transaction. Thank you. And my standard questions as far as ERP, what effect, if any, is it going to have on Public Works?
Right, so Public Works is actually gonna probably be one of the first out of the box here in regards to it. So we've gone through the process of the brown paper bag, I think is the PPB. That's our current process is to see how we do things in facilities from when a work order comes in to any type of purchasing. Same thing with roads and bridges and with our sanitary group. So we went through that process, then we went back and looked at best practices out there in the field. And the thing with the EAM component, and that's the piece that everyone needs to be well aware of here. EAM, there's multiple versions of this around the country, so there's plenty of examples of how this was used in other areas. So right now we are formatting or putting together our future case of what it's going to look like, and I'm anticipating to see all of that by mid-December, and then we're going to finalize the document by then. Our intent is to roll this out. I think it's in March is what we're looking for as a timeline for the EAM, and we're going to start in the sanitary group first and to see how we're going to be implementing it. But the efficiencies, for currently our business practices of how to, when work comes up, how that work order gets to out to the field there, tracking time in the field for our personnel, and then when we're ordering materials. Mike currently has people on staff right now that are doing double entry, like the famous system doesn't tie in with our system. So we think we're just going to see a general efficiency improvement on reporting on any of the activities we're doing. Mike, I don't know if you want to touch on a little bit more.
I'll go back to sanitary real quick. Back in 2006, we had like $12 million worth of revenue. 2016, we're at 24.7. We've almost, well over 100% growth. And we keep attracting more and more communities. One of the things we don't have is timely data. Our men and women out in the fields are filling out sheets of paper. It's got to come back. It's got to get logged in. And we're driving that ship a little bit blind. This ERP now will enable them to enter it right into the field, and we'll know exactly where we're at live. The reason that's important is some of our communities have, a good significant cash balance. Some of them are running low. And we got to be able to sit there and adjust our program so that we don't overspend in some of our communities. So this will give us live information. The same thing now with OBM, I think there's maybe $1 million or $2 million worth of personnel expenses that we have to move around. All 600 of our employees fill out a timesheet by hand. It has to get keyed into Excel, and then we have to sort that, use that data, and then move expenses around. That takes about 2 months after, to do, because each pay period takes about 3 or 4 weeks to key in by hand. First, we have to get all 600 of them. We have to tie it to the register, and we have to key it into a system. The ERP is going to give us so much more time, so much more live data, and then we can become more auditors, and we can start auditing the data instead of just typing the data and seeing where the trends are. It's going to be huge for us. And then like Mike said, the director said, with the work order system in our buildings, we'll know exactly how much we're spending in this room versus how much we're just spending in the building. We can take it to that level, to the room, to the location, instead of just the building as a whole. It's going to be huge.
Do these efficiencies and effectiveness show up in the budget that we're looking at here?
I would say in the current budget, no. I don't believe that they're showing up in there in regards to like personnel.
Yeah, like in dollars.
Specifically.
Dollars.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily show that because what you're working with now in finance, for example, or our men and women of the trades, it's not gonna save them time. It's gonna give us live data to make better decisions as management. The people that are keying that data in, like I indicated before, I have 2 individuals doing it, they can now audit that and say, hey, instead of us waiting for an auditor to come in and say, what's that trend about? We're gonna know live about what that's trend about, and we can correct them live. So as far as personnel savings, there may not be necessarily the public works, but there may be a redundancy in other areas where they might be able to, cut back on personnel.
Well, everybody keeps pointing to the other areas where we're gonna see the savings, and it's not gonna be their area, but it's gonna be somebody else there. So I'm just asking.
No, I'm with you.
I keep wanting to find which area, because the ERP is, we're being told is adding personnel. You're telling me you're gonna get some efficiencies, but no effective reduction in budget. So I'm not trying to find fault with it. I'm just trying to identify where's this magical department that's gonna start seeing the savings that's gonna result in lower costs to this county.
In fairness to that question, you're gonna have to wait till we get the systems in place, because until we get them in place, we're still in the designing phase. We don't have anything conceptually. We do have it conceptually, but we haven't got the final product. We're still building that. And until then, we're still, like I said, months behind with the data. Eventually, when we're up and running, we'd be able to answer that question a little bit easier and say, you know what, we can, if someone leaves through attrition, we don't have to hire that position back, because the ERP is making that much easier to do. And I'm assuming everyone else will do the same thing.
Also,
My concern is when you're spending $25+ million, we should be forecasting where we're gonna see those savings. You wouldn't build a building without forecasting what it's gonna look like, and so I'm just kind of saying, we're building a system here, and nobody seems to be forecasting any of the savings.
Well, I think what you're gonna see the savings is in regards to like preventative maintenance measures in some of my buildings. There's a schedule of activities that need to take place in each of those buildings where we can accurately forecast, I need 2 personnel to do such and such work in these filters in a building itself, the air filters in a building. And you see that, be it in board control or even sometimes coming before this council. We buy a significant number of air filters that need change out. What I've come to recognize is that we have 2 personnel that's pretty much dedicated to that, changing out filters in multiple buildings throughout the county. For us, productivity, I think we'll get a better sense of how our workforce is working also. You'll be able to somewhat track kind of units of how long it takes to do something, and be able to notice if something has gone askew in regards to why does it take so long to do a certain activity. And I think that's in turn, then we can evaluate that and figure out, do we need something more, or do we need to retrain an employee to be able to do a certain task in a certain amount of time. I think there's gonna be huge savings for us, because right now, we're doing it on the back of an envelope. And I know that's kind of a crude way of saying it, but the way Public Works operates today, and we've been talking about the ERP for a long time. It's time that it needs to come forward. For the true savings of it, I can't give you a hard number on it right now, but I'm just gonna see something definitely significant happening with the department itself,
And
for the
Mike-
better.
Mike, you indicated you're going live with a piece of it by March, is that what I think?
March is the intent. There's a sanitary component. So the EAM, because there's roughly 4 different pieces to EAM. So there's a sanitary piece, there's a road and bridge, there's a facility piece, and there's a fleet piece that is tied to this.
What
So,
does EAM stand for?
Enterprise Asset Management. It's basically the work order system, the brain behind it all, to track from time, for tasks, for
everything. I mean, it's gonna track all the costs associated with it. So we'll be armed with that information live.
So what you'll see is that, like our current workforce, they are going to be utilizing, much like their cell phones, to track when their work order comes in for a specific trade. It's gonna come in saying that the heat is off on the 6th floor of the Justice Center in Judge Danny Gall's office. So that somebody needs to react to it, and then it'll have the history of any activity that's taking place in Mr. Gall's office or Judge Gall's office, so that they can track it down, find out if it's a reoccurring issue or whatnot. The time, the efficiency that'll be associated with it. Many of our trades right now currently have cell phones tracking their activities on any given day. So in the long run, I see this as a net gain for the county overall.
If I can add too, with sanitary, we're hoping to keep growing it. I mean, we grew $12 million in 10 years. We can keep growing gives us live data. We can be more efficient with our crews. They'll be able to, much like, all the other people out there, will show up in their area, hey, go to this spot. Right now, they go out to their general idea. We're all on radio calling people around, but it'll be much more efficient. I think we'll see the savings for our communities. May not always be the general fund or our budgets, but the communities will be saving more money as well. I see with this as well.
So your impression is you're going to be based on a March date, because we were told in this room that we were not going to see the system going live until June.
Right.
So you're going to be 3 months ahead of the system going live?
So the financial package is coming a little bit behind us. We're going to start with our work order system. So there'll be a slight update to the EAM probably towards the end of 18 when financials are coming online. So we're getting our people acclimated to it. They're going to get a 95% version of what the system is going to be. There'll be a slight alteration towards, I'm thinking in the fall, of what the final system is. But they're going to get their hands-on experience today. And the key piece of this is getting everybody trained to utilize the system.
And data being entered and cross-checking and all those kind of
Garbage in,
things
garbage
before you go
out.
live. But if you're going live in March, this is the first I'm hearing that anybody's going live in
But
March.
we're going live with one section of sanitary.
It's okay.
time.
It's
We're gonna
going live.
bring 'em in, yeah.
And
You've got to
there's-
turn the switch on.
There's different components within sanitary. So there's like the house crews, there's the jetting crews, there's the pump station crews. So those are each staggered. There's phases to each of those also, just so you're aware.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Conwell.
Thank you. Through the chair to the director, I'm gonna go back to the reverse auctions. So you stated, Director, 25% of savings from other states you've noticed. Who are the other states?
It was a presentation that I went to on it. I couldn't tell you offhand, but I know it was related to elevators, and I believe it was about 25%. It was a significant, in the millions of dollars for them. Obviously, we don't have as many as elevators as that, but this was a couple of months ago, which is one of the reasons why we thought, let's try it with our elevator. We knew that was coming up.
Can you get us that information, find
Sure.
out who it was? And who are we currently in contract with?
We're with the Schindler Group as our current, and they were our previous. It's a 3-year contract. Yeah, so the last time we had Schindler also, and pretty much on a 40-hour basis, there is a technician in the Justice Center 40 hours a week for Schindler, working on anything. I mean, there's roughly 23 systems within the Justice Center itself. So that person's just moving around, checking things, keeping everything operational, since it's the second busiest building.
So the 3-year contract ends when?
It just ended recently, and we're extending it for 6
Okay,
months.
I thought you had mentioned that. And the current elevator contracts include what buildings?
So the Justice Center complex, you have the old courthouse, you have Courthouse Square, you have Virgil Brown, Jane Edna Hunter, Juvenile Justice Center, Board of Elections.
That is included in that. I was wondering about
BOE
that.
is, yeah, definitely.
Okay. They just did some renovation on there.
They sure did.
Was that was an addition to this
Yeah, that was a
contract?
standalone contract when we did the
Okay.
renovations at the BOE. So we did an assessment of all these systems back in 2013 or 12. We knew which ones needed capital improvements. There's a freight elevator over at the county courthouse square right now. That is probably the next major rehab project that needs to take place, and you'll probably see something in regards to that coming in. It's in actually our CIP.
Is this the contract for the elevators here? Is that in there?
No, that'll be a standalone contract. This is just for clear maintenance of it. There is, if we'd like to do some minor improvements to a facility, we have a little bit of room within that contract, but the intent is any major rehab or anything like that, those are standalone. We'll put out for bid.
Okay, because I'm trying to go back in memory. I don't believe we had Schindler when we first started. I thought we had Otis, and we had switched, going back to the old.
I don't know if it was Otis or Koenig, I can't remember.
Because
myself.
I remember the conversation in the chambers, and it was, believe
get
we,
that for you. We can get
they
it.
had talked about a sole source, or we were very limited. I remember we were very limited in
Right.
who we could use.
I may be stand corrected that Otis, I think, was bought up by one of them. So there was four major vendors, and now it's down to 3 players, and Koenig is one of the other ones. So Otis may have been been bought up by Schindler. That's,
Okay.
I'll check on that and I'll get back to you, okay?
Okay, and for the reverse auctions, will this have any impact on safety of operations for the elevators?
Absolutely not. No, we're using the exact same specs we used last time. We're kind of pretty much doing the same thing we always did, putting it out to bid. It'll be going out probably the next couple of weeks, maybe month. And then when it comes in, like I said, then we turn it over to the auction people. So no, everything else will be the same. We're controlling all of that.
Okay, and also it was mentioned that I believe it was from the director, $350,000 will have to be found if the other things, but I just want to be clear on it. So there's a $350,000 shortfall. You've given the administration some ways that you would kind of can try to make it up with procurement and things of that nature, but if that doesn't rule successful, then you still have a shortfall of $350,000.
That's correct, and that's where the responsibility coming back on the department. And since I've agreed as the department head to participate in this, and I figured this was a reasonable number, where I think we're going to see some success in it, and it's not an outlandish number. So that's why we decided. So if we do not meet that goal of $350,000, then it'll be up to the department within the general fund here to try and find the remaining, that make up that difference. So I hope to go through, I hope not to go through that exercise. I hope we clearly see that these savings that'll come from the reverse auction process.
One last question in connection with the county planning. So how will the impact, is there any impact in your department since they have to utilize, they're going to now use road and bridge funds to make up their, what if any impact does that have on Public Works?
Well, first off, I'd just like to recognize that we do have a great relationship with the planning department, and there is strong correlation between what they're doing and what our department overall, our program. And we work very closely with that group. A $500,000 would be a reduction in currently how we put out our program to the various communities. But I think there's a true correlation to the relationship there, and we're willing to support that.
Okay, so we're taking $500,000 out of road and bridge funds to loan to the planning commission, or be put in that. Have you done any projections of, I don't know how far in advance you knew of the $500,000 and how it would be utilized? Because I know Public Works has a schedule of roads and projects and things that they're going to do. Can you give us an idea what scale would that be? One project, or, because I know you have different programs where you
That's
get
right.
different funding and.
So we have the 9 programs, 9 programs that are in place there. So we'll take a reduction from each of those programs. Some of them are significant at $2 million a year. Some are at $1.5 million, the maintenance program. I think we'll leave that one whole and try and continue to make sure that that stays intact. So we haven't clearly outlined which were one of the programs, but we'll try and minimize it.
Can you let us know when you
Sure will.
determine which programs?
Definitely
those are?
will. Definitely will.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown, followed by Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did I hear there was $300,000 in savings using the reverse auction this year?
We've committed to $350,000 of the overall. I think it was $1 million has been proposed from the Innovation Department, and Public Works is $350,000. I think the Sheriff's Office, there was a percentage out of there, and maybe some others. So 400.
So has there been any savings? Have we exercised this? I thought I may have heard someone say we've tried this process
Not with us,
currently.
there may have been, but not with us.
No, I can't speak to it.
Okay, and then you talked about the ERP in particular with the sanitary department and reducing the use of paper process, if you will, and increasing general efficiencies. One of the last meetings that we had, or that I participated in with you, Director Dever, we kind of talked about those individuals receiving iPads or tools to improve the efficiency. Is that calculated in this current budget?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
No, I did. I added money into the both sanitary, road and bridge budget for that equipment.
Okay, and can you speak to roughly how much that will be?
I believe it was 150,000 for road and bridge, and these are just estimates because I really don't know, and I think it was very similar to sanitary, but I can certainly get you the exact numbers.
Okay, and with that transition from paper to electronic, will that have any impact on the printing budget? I see printing falls under your purview.
Yeah, no, none of that ties in with the print shop. The print shop, whenever they perform a service for any of the county departments, and that's billed directly to the respective department. So like the Board of Elections for any of their printing. So, I mean, we're buying reams of paper and obviously printing out things. It's not gonna impact the
Okay. So what is our current budget for printing? Just curious.
Fast copy is, for 2018, it's gonna be 2.3 million. And that includes not just printing, but it's also, the copy, cost per copy and stuff like that. So it's a combination. There's 7 employees in there. The print shop budget, if I separate it, I think it's gonna be about half. I mean, we have 7 employees. You have the equipment. I will tell you this much, we are, exploring alternatives right now with the print shop. We're looking at some avenues. We're working with IT to come up with a game plan. We're not quite there yet, but we're looking at ways to maybe try and streamline it and be efficient. We know the biggest cost to the print shop is really the equipment, the capital repairs. So, owning the equipment has some negatives too. And, so we're looking at maybe trying to do a little more outsourcing and then kind of do a phased out approach, over the next 5 years possibly. So we're kind of exploring some things.
Okay, and speaking of outsourcing, with the custodial services, I noticed there was a line that said a reduction in services. Can you speak to that? What type of services, and are we contemplating outsourcing some of those?
No, that's not gonna happen. There's no employees intended to be outsourced out of that custodial fund. That's where we believe we're gonna see the savings in some energy efficiency. And like I said at the opening of the discussion here, that over the last 10 years or so, Public Works, even before I was involved, had gone through some various energy efficiency measures, and we're continuing to do that. Each time we do any type of improvement, you have boiler systems that improve on how they heat a building, or you do something with windows, like we put solar shades on in certain windows and things like that. That increases the efficiency of those buildings, and that's where we see some of these savings coming from.
So is it safe to say that you worked with Director Foley with regards to the solar panels that are going to be utilized for the buildings that we discussed?
That's right.
And can you speak to the savings as it relates to that?
They'll be more long term, but yes.
Yeah, I can't speak to it just yet. I'm sorry, but I don't have that available.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Simon has joined the meeting, and Ms. Baker's next.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things with the shifting of dollars. The 2 million from the pedestrian walkway that was going to be put into Public Works, but now is going to be used for the general fund. And then also the 3 million that is from the capital, I guess it's the maintenance fee that we find is in excess, 3 million in 18 and 3 million in 19, that is now going to try and plug the general fund budget. Don't those dollars impact your public works, streets and roads and bridges needs? how do you account for those dollars not being part of your fund?
Well, it's true. For some of those items in particular that are that $3 million change from the 500,000 for the Planning Commission, the $2 million associated with Lakeside and Ontario improvements. Those are clearly road and I can utilize dollars, road and bridge dollars for those type of improvements. A decision is made that yes, if we can utilize these funds so that we can utilize other general fund dollars in a more responsive or a way to assist other areas of the county. It will impact our overall program, and we're still, we have an aggressive program, and we look to spend everything that we do get and impact. In fact, you know, the $5 fee is before this council and for consideration next Tuesday. We feel very confident that we'll be able to expend those dollars once they come online, and in 19 is when the date is. The pedestrian bridge itself, there's that $2 million a year. That project right now is on hold because of the overall cost of it, and we're looking to others to come up with a strategy to make up that shortfall for that project to move forward. So stay tuned. Hopefully there'll be some information on that sometime in the first quarter of 18.
If I may, Chair, I guess my question though is that I understand you can connect the dots and say that $2 million you can relate to the pedestrian walkway because it is repair or creation or but it wasn't initially going to be paid for that way. It was not, it was going to be taken out of the general fund. So I'm just asking that must have an impact if it wasn't in your planning strategy to have $2 million taken out. Does that detract then from your plan of what it is that you were going to address in streets and roads and bridges? And the same with the capital reduction for maintenance of buildings. Is that $3 million and $3 million, which is $6 million over the next 2 years, were those dollars anticipated to pay for streets, roads, and bridges within your own department?
Well, the program, our overall 9-point program, which, you know, I've showed it to you on a number of occasions. Yes, the intent is to bolster those programs so that we can outreach to the communities. And there is an effect. There's no doubt about it. We are going to continue to strategize in ways to try and expend those, or to leverage those dollars so that they can go much further. Any of the dollars that we're talking about here, we're not looking at any additional personnel or anything like that. Our intent is to purely put that into capital. And so I don't, for operational purposes, no, I'm not looking to do that. But, you know, there's...
I guess if I may just continue, my concern is not so much that we're doing this, I can justify it like you can, that it is related. It's the $5 license fee that we are going to be asking to have increased in order to make up for what streets and roads and bridges we can't do right now. That, I guess, is the conflict I have in filling the budget hole with these dollars. Is there, I mean, are you concerned about that? I mean, can you justify increasing on one hand and decreasing on another?
Yes, I can. I think at the net balance, there is definitely going to be additional revenue. The hope is, if this council chooses to support it, that this net increase is going to see a significant benefit, I think, to the area. We're going to, like I said, strongly support the program, continue to hammer it forward, and to make it as successful as possible.
All right. And just for the record, it was stated that you have approximately $30 million in revenue set aside for streets and roads and bridges, and that the couple of $1 million that we're asking to fit the general fund now, you don't need those because you have so much in excess that you don't have enough personnel to address. Can you just for the record, state that that is something where you do have those dollars spent, you do have streets and roads and bridges in your program, ready to spend,
Right.
and is on horizon.
Right, so obviously, we're responsible for developing a 5-year program. And I have copies of that 5-year program that will make sure we distribute to council. That 5-year program accounts for the entire budget of public works. So there is substantial work out there. And the more money that we have, I'm sure the more we can spend in regards to improving the infrastructure of the county here. So we clearly do have a plan laid out. We may not have specific, the federal aid programs, projects, those are 3 to 5 year timetable projects. Those are clearly outlined, but then the shorter term projects, those that are the 50-50 program, which I've spoke to you about before, those are projects that we identify now. And I know that came up in I believe the Public Works Committee, we talked about waiting on the pavement condition ratings for 16, which come from NOACA with the support of the Ohio Department of Transportation. We finally have a draft of that. We do not have a final of that. And actually, I have a copy to show you the condition of roads throughout the county here that where we would spend those dollars. So we've finally got an idea where we're going to spend next year on specific projects, and we're filling out those respective areas where we're going to be hitting next year. These are, once again, the methodology we use is pavement condition rating, average daily traffic on the road, and then there's some smaller criteria that we utilize. But this will help us fill out and figure out which projects we're going to take on the short term.
Okay.
Capital, federal aid jobs, those take time. And those are clearly laid out in the plan. But the other, should I say smaller or localized projects, those are filled in 1, 2, and 3 years here. Right. And with this new NOACA pavement condition rating system, we're going to lay out the next 3 years. Within the next 4 months here, you're going to see the clear layout of what's going to be spent within the next 4 years. But we have those programs or program dollars for those programs set in each of the 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. Okay. So we have those dollars set there. We just don't know which is the specific road. I hopefully that was
That's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and I have a couple questions. First, on the strategic sourcing initiative, we've talked about the reverse auctions. My question is whether there are other ways that we're expecting to achieve savings on strategic sourcing, or whether the reverse auctions essentially are the strategic sourcing initiative.
Yeah, a couple things we're trying to do. As you know, sometimes when some people leave, it creates a void, but we finally got our procurement staff within Public Works up to reach. One of the things we found out we weren't doing is we weren't calling vendors and asking for a discount if we can pay timely. We're looking to try and explore those avenues. We're also looking to see, hey, are there any rebates you can do? Now that we finally got our procurement section pretty much filled, we're trying to play catch up on some of our contracts, but we're also going to start looking into making some calls and seeing if they'll give us discounts and rebates. In addition to that, I think our biggest savings is going to be in our space maintenance fund, which is where a lot of these ultimately roll up into, which we ultimately charge county agencies. Over the years, like I went back to the very beginning, if you wanted your office remodeled, we did it, and that all kind of got dumped into space maintenance. Wasn't necessarily fair to everybody else in the building. That's just how it was done. 2 years ago, we said, from now on, we're only doing what's truly space maintenance, replacing light bulbs, plumbing. Anything above and beyond, we're going to have you work with OBM and fund it yourself. And so far this year, it's about, I think, almost $400,000 or $500,000 in direct projects that's not going to be in the space maintenance fund. So our labor that's associated with that, our full-time labor, is going to be charged at we'll call them mini projects. So we feel pretty comfortable that we're going to, come very close to that. In addition to the reverse auction, in addition to, looking at our contracts and trying to get better savings from them.
Okay, just a note that having the the project's not done out of the space maintenance, it doesn't cancel anything, it just funds it someplace else.
Absolutely, but it's not, the agencies themselves' budget should go down, because in the past, they were funding them, everybody was kind of funding them. So, yes, if they don't have the money, we will not do the project. And that's how we're doing it, it's upfront. We give them a quote, it goes to OBM to be signed off on, and then we perform it.
Okay, and also on the cost savings on facilities, you mentioned that you were hoping to achieve cost savings through energy efficiency, through utility savings, and my question is whether that's where all the facility savings are going to come from, or are there other places where facility savings are going to come from?
Well, there's a couple things on that. I think the bulk of our stuff's gonna come from, trying to have our men and women do projects, whether they're capital and things like that. In addition to the utilities, you and I both know that if we have a very cold winter, we can't necessarily project that, but what we can say is we would have spent more. All of the things that we put into place so far, the retrofitting, obviously is designed to reduce our spend, but the one thing I can't control is the weather and the cold, so our goal is, yes, theoretically, we should definitely see a savings in utilities. And the same thing when eventually we get the solar long-term savings, we'll be producing our own power. But once again, the weather plays a bit of a game there with that.
So the energy savings is basically where you're expecting the facility savings to come from?
Some of it. And then, like I said, the labor component of doing projects is a big part of it. Our contracts, looking for savings in our contracts. Obviously, our labor, we're not anticipating adding anybody, so we're constantly looking at it. And then with the ERP, like I went to the very beginning, once it's built, we can certainly see then where we can reduce, redundancies.
And one final question. There was an incident that occurred some months ago where a $10,000 unit broke down and it created a water leak that cost $500,000. My question is whether the ERP will provide data that will enable us to avoid situations like that.
Well, yes, it will, because the preventative maintenance schedule and replacement schedule on certain assets within the county. So, how often, and currently they do that, they have basically logs on each piece of equipment. And the intent is to review those logs to find out when it needs to be serviced. This is gonna be automated into the future. And so we'll have that information saying, look inside the next 2 weeks here, you've got certain pieces of equipment that need some type of maintenance done on it. And it's gonna provide more timely information so you can address those things before it becomes a capital failure.
Anything else about Public Works? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we are going to revert back to Soil and Water Conservation District and bring up Ms. Jan Ribka, the Executive Director, to present on that budget.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was late. I didn't see the agenda, and then I was dealing with the auditor of the state. So anyway.
It's not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
You had to sit through a little bit,
That's okay.
But other than that, no harm.
That's okay. Well, Chairman Miller, President Brady, and the council, I am glad to have this opportunity to address you today. And we're kind of a special case, Soil and Water is, and I'm here today, quite frankly, to ask you for a very, very modest increase in our budget, in our subsidy of $25,000. That's what I'm asking for. Our subsidy over the past 6 years has averaged $75,000 a year. In the past 16 years, our agency has grown from 3 staff to 16 staff. So you can see that in relation to the money that we receive, we have used that money wisely, we have shepherded it, we have leveraged it multiple times. And to do things that benefit every one of your residents in your council districts. And when, I've sat here in the past couple sessions and I look at that county seal, and when I look at it, I see 2 of the 4 graphics on there related to exactly what we do in soil and water, what we have done since 1949 for this county, and that's dealing with land and water issues. They are the issues that are very important to all of us that live and work in Cuyahoga County. They are the things that are essential to the quality of life in Cuyahoga County, certainly having healthy soils, good land, and clean water. Some of the things, I look at that leave, and I know Director Foley is really interested in how do we restore our tree canopy. We know that in Cleveland alone, once the forest city, our canopy is shrinking year by year. And when we think about what's happening in terms of the change, the increased rainstorms and the velocity of the rain and the damage that does to the property, people that complain every spring, residents, your constituents that call us up and say, please help us, that things like trees are essential because they help slow down the water. If we're talking about future of climate change, the air that we breathe, the change in the temperature, and the hardest hit people are those in the inner ring suburbs and in the city. So the work that we're doing, that we have done for 16 years, we were planting trees long before anybody started talking about the tree canopy, and happy to do that because we think trees are really important to water quality. So I'm asking for $25,000, and I want you to know that $25,000 brings in an additional 52% from the state. So all this money that taxpayers in Cuyahoga County pay to the state, our agency is able to bring that back. So that increase actually represents $39,000 more to our budget. Now, you probably know, especially Mr. Schron, you're a businessman, well, you can't even hire a staff person for $39,000 a year. And our budget is primarily staff. It's going to be a $1 million budget. We have 12 staff people. That's grown from 3 in 2001 to 12 in 2018. And I can't tell you where I can't cut the budget anywhere. Our expenses are about as low as they can be. In fact, one of the reasons I'm asking for this small increase is to help offset our need. We were in a county building, loved being in a county building, wish we were still in a county building, but because of our growth, we could no longer fit in with the sanitary engineers. And we miss kind of being with them, but we do enjoy being on the Near East Side. And we looked long and hard for space. There was no county space available to us. So we do have increased expenses related to that. We tried really hard. We bought a space that was move-in ready. We bought used furniture, and it's a wonderful space, and I invite you all there. So again, I'm requesting, I feel sheepish on one hand, but I would be remiss on behalf of my board and my staff if I didn't ask for that $25,000 increase after all these years. And again, know that that money is going to bring additional funds back to Cuyahoga County.
At the beginning of your presentation, you said you went from 3 to 16 staff, and later you said 12. Is 12 the right number?
I'm sorry, 12.
12 is the right number. Okay, fine. Okay. Any other questions for soil and water? Ms. Baker?
Thank you. Just a question on your, under your bullet of urban agriculture landowner technical assistance. A good part, if not the majority, of what we have issues with our water is the runoff
Yes.
from the farmers
Yes.
and the fertilizer, and even at one time the salt, which I think we've changed over to non-salt for streets and roads, and all that runoff. I know at the state level, we have reined in different criteria for farmers, when they can run off, they can't run off excess at the end of the season, all kinds of different things. I think they can't, depending on when there's rain in the forecast.
Exactly.
There's all kinds of different, for those that are really into understanding all that. So where are you in this? understanding that this is really a pretty big deal, and you have here, the specialist has worked with urban farmers to assist them with soil and irrigation issues. Sustain the position will enable to continue assistance to urban farmers. So, you know,
Yeah.
how is your progress, given that that's a pretty big deal?
That's a really great question. The problem, especially in the western basin of Lake Erie, and the paper yesterday just, I think,
I
spoke
saw
to it
that too.
again. And it's a huge problem. We contribute less, but I'll tell you, about 5 years ago, the state encouraged all the soil and waters, and there's a soil and water in every single county, to encourage all of us to take part in, they called the 4 R's, and it was about nutrient reduction. And even though we're an urban district and we don't have those farms that put on those kind of, phosphorus and nitrogen and that kind of things, but our mantra is we are part of the problem. Even if we're a small part of it, we should be part of the solution. So we were trained, and they call it the 4 R's, and how you put on those herbicides and not herbicides, on the fertilizers on the ground. And we actually teamed up with our other local soil and waters and printed in Spanish and in English brochures about how us as homeowners, so how homeowners and municipalities, government entities, golf courses could reduce how much fertilizer they put on the ground. We had posters that were posted at, the various cities. We did the brochures, we did bookmarks, and distributed those in English and Spanish. And that's how we addressed it. Now, our urban agriculture, they're like community farms, they're very small. But the interesting thing about that gentleman that we hired through the first ever grant, given a national grant from the National Association of Conservation Districts for a program, and we pursued that grant because every year we have a meeting called a local work group meeting. And it's primarily to get people who are working the lands to come and talk about the resource concerns in Cuyahoga County. And there were a couple of citizens that have hoop houses. Those are those things that you can grow your crops and extend the growing season. They received federal money for cost share for that. And a couple of the people that were there, the urban farmers, if you will, said, can somebody help us? Can somebody give us the blueprint for urban agriculture? And we're just like, that's it. And we pursued the funding, we received the funding, and I'm happy to say, and we'll have a press release out shortly, that Justin Husher, our urban ag specialist, created something. It's a living, breathing, web-based tool that anybody that is interested in learning, the ABCs of urban farming can do, and it covers things like herbicides. But he also did a cover crop presentation, and that's one thing that I really see as something that the Soil and Water Conservation District can do. And that's that we live in a county, the most urban county in the state, and we have soils that are so depleted, they are dead. And if they were alive, and healthy soils contain so many microorganisms, it's incredible. They're teeny, teeny, tiny, but it's incredible. And if you can restore that soil, it's good for crops, it's good for people, it's pulling in the carbon out of the atmosphere, and we just think that we have a real potential for doing something with that. I'm super excited. So if I had to project into the future, that's something I want to do. Okay.
If I may just follow up with that. I agree. I mean, we're certainly not a farming community, but we do have golf courses. We do have people that put that type of pesticides on their lawns. The surface, depending on how much surface you have, especially for those in business, have to pay more now as more surface that they're using for the runoff that's not absorbed into the ground. A lot of things have been happening and trying to rein in some of those issues that are causing the most problem in our waters. In Westlake, we have also retention basins. There are no commercial property that does not have its own retention basin that catches the water and releases it slowly. And there's also a plant life that is, I believe, mandated that they must have a certain plant life in that retention basin to clean the water as it goes through. Are any of those things, is that on your radar? Do you, are you a proponent of all that?
Oh, absolutely. So we are actually working with the city of Westlake to do, and that was one of the things on my list, the inspections, their annual inspections of those water quality and water quantity basins. And even taking that a step back, when we're working with the development community on the implementation of their stormwater pollution prevention plans, one of the things we're looking for is what they're doing during construction and then what they're building for after construction, because they are required to make sure that more water is not running off the land after construction that was running off before, and there's a clean water component to that. So those basins, whether they're above ground, they can be storage units under the ground.
That's right.
But here's what happens, a lot of times that they're not even built correctly. And if we're out there in the field and we can see that and we can look at the plans and say, whoa, wait a minute, and that happened with the Cleveland Public School project on the west side, that it was pretty much far along, school's ready to open, and just like, whoa, this basin's not even going to work. It's not even constructed properly. So those inspections once a year, and we'll look to see is the inlet, is the water flowing in? Is it able to flow out? What is the plant? Is the soil compacted? If it's not going to allow for that filtration. And that, all bottom line, it helps reduce, especially the water quantity basins, captures the water, holds the water, detains it, so it's not running off the land, and helping to lessen the potential for flooding.
Good to know. Thanks.
Sure.
Anything else for soil and water? Thank you very much. We will consider your request.
Thank you.
Well, my colleagues, we have come to the end of the presentations of departments. I'd like to say a few things about the next steps. First of all, the meeting previously scheduled for next Tuesday, the 14th, has been canceled. We think it's going to take a little bit longer than that to come up with a proposal on where we go from here. I don't think people will object to having 4 hours of time freed up on their schedule. And the following meeting will be on Monday, the 20th at 1 p.m. And we're also asking people to hold Monday, the 27th at 1 p.m. on their schedule if necessary, if we need an additional meeting. So with that, I would like to invite my colleagues, if they have any comments or concerns about the budget they would like to share. And I would like to start by bringing up a few items that are the highest priority concerns to me. First of all is the educational assistance program, proposed to be cut from $1 million to $500,000. This program is at the intersection of human services, workforce development, economic development, and front-end approaches to improving economic and social well-being in Cuyahoga County. So I don't support reducing that program. Second is that I support keeping Metro Hospital as the health care provider at our jail. There's been a lot of discussion about that item, so I won't say more other than that it's near the top of my priority list. Third is the starting point contract, which plays a pivotal role in enabling children to have access to high-quality child care by helping the child care providers improve their capabilities. And I have concern that a reduction in that program could destabilize a much larger system, and so I don't support that. And the last one, and on this one, I know that the administration is working with us on this, so I share this, so I am grateful for their efforts, which is that we have identified the need for additional resources to provide higher quality services at Norma Hare Women's Shelter and to improve the overflow system, and I support providing the additional resources for this purpose. So those are some of my concerns, and Council President Brady is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your comments. Support many of those issues that you brought up myself quite strongly. I wanted to sort of step back for a second and just share some thoughts with the council about where we've been in this process over the last several weeks. We got the budget from the executive about 4 weeks ago, more or less. We immediately began to have sessions with the chairman of the committee, myself, and some members of the staff that week, and had a series of conversations that are 3 or 4 weeks ago on the budget, line by line, as it was presented to us in a format that that the staff created itself. You may remember we had a little problem getting budget books. So we did what we could to work with what we had. Everything wasn't a surprise. We had been given a heads up for several weeks on some issues, and there had been some discussions between myself and the chairman of this committee, and the vice president of the council, and the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, and myself and the executive, and several one-on-ones, and people sharing their thoughts on many of these issues. We are going to now take a second shot at that process this week, and the chairman of the committee and I will be meeting in with various council members over the course of this week to go over the budget now again, line by line, so that we have a better understanding, and that the council is certainly coming to have a pretty good understanding of a difficult and complicated budget, one that we're handed, which the executive certainly is a challenging budget for the executive to present to us. The cuts that we've received from the state and the growth of the budget in general have culminated in a difficult budget for us this cycle. But we are ready to tackle those issues, and I would hope that the information that we receive as we talk together and work together this week will enable us to be in a position next week to have a pretty good idea of where the council stands on the variety of issues that are in front of us. And I think we should be on schedule to work with the administration to get this budget done in a timely way. It is a lot of work, and this is a complicated and different budget than the first three that the new government has seen. And I appreciate the work of the chairman and others and all the feedback that we've gotten up to this point. I want to encourage everybody to continue to be part of that process as we make our final decisions about what the council sees as an appropriate budget for 2018, 2019.
Thank you very much, Council President. Any other comments by my colleagues? Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to other committee members, I agree with Councilman Miller on some of his key points that he mentioned, but one thing for me, and there's probably a lot, but top two would be collapse, being cut and or reorganized, whatever the administration is looking at that to be. The impact on the neighborhood services and the outcomes go against the HHS plan, strategic plan that we just talked about, as well as another one of my key things is the public defenders not having parity with the prosecutor's office. I know this is a nationwide issue and problem, but I look at it as globally, as a global issue. If we're not giving proper legal and law and all that to people that are innocent, and everybody's innocent in my mind until they're proven guilty. We are not giving them a fair and legal representation. Then we're impacting so many of our other services, our jail services, our court services, by not being able to bring that up and making that fair. So those are two of my top two, along with some of the ones that Councilman Miller mentioned.
Thank you very much. Ms. Simon is next.
Thank you. Just a few comments regarding what I would like to see perhaps restored would be public defender and increase their budget. They've been quiet for years about what their needs are, and certainly I've known they need more than they've been saying, and it's unfortunate it comes at a time when we're, a critical time with our budget, but I agree with my colleague that if we don't address this, it's going to be resulting in much more expensive and costs. And secondly, I want to look at the demo program closely.
Okay, great. Ms. Baker's next, followed by Tuma.
Yes, and a lot has already been said. You can see we have a lot to discuss, and I'm certainly not in disagreement with all of what was pointed out. But one that I hadn't heard is the housing penalty for leasing. And I think the way it's stated in the budget, it's at the maximum of 150. I would certainly like to make sure, because it's at least new to us, to be proactive in collecting this penalty, that we certainly give a grace period and that we charge the minimum of $50 and not 150. It's perceived to be a money grab, I believe, that if we go to the maximum of what we can get, I think $50 is enough of a penalty to reinforce the need to have these houses that are rented registered.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Tuma?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, just in reviewing many of the budget issues, some of them have been touched on by my colleagues, but I think the Public Defender's Office certainly made their case to council for the need for additional funding there to level the playing field somewhat. Again, it's not necessary to say we're taking away from the prosecutor to pay the public defender, but certainly they need to be put on a closer playing field. In addition, the demolition fund, I think that warrants further discussion, given the fact that this council at some point pledged funding for that demolition projects. And to take those away, 17 million, I just think that warrants further discussion and a closer look at that whole policy. And then finally, I want to make sure that we continue to ensure that the opioid epidemic that's out there is certainly funded properly. The federal government recently declared an emergency, and it's going to take every level of government to fight this issue that's out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, Vice President Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you've all mentioned many of the things, but I'll just reiterate the ones that are on my mind, which is the public defenders as well. Parity is something that will happen over time, but I do believe we need to move the needle and start moving in that direction. Obviously, the demolition fund, I was the primary sponsor of the demolition fund. I certainly would not be opposed to full restoration, but I am open to consideration if we do have a budget deficit, and we do have to keep an open mind, and I do have an open mind about that. If there is another number, then I certainly will be willing to consider it. Those are my two major concerns, and I'll stop there, although I support many of the other things that were also said.
Anything else? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I also support restoring the educational assistance program subsidy for workforce and college. Now, basically, is half of that scholarship money. And I'm still waiting for the federal dollars to flow in for opioid support programs from the federal government after they declared an emergency. Hopefully, we'll see some.
Okay. And Ms. Brown?
Lastly, one that we didn't speak about that Dr. Jones mentioned was the faith-based initiative. It's a $300,000 request that I think can be utilized in a long way. So that would be the one thing that I would ask as we consider making adjustments.
Okay. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to add my voice to that last recommendation as well.
Okay, Conwell?
I just wanted to make a statement in terms of, to Councilman Tuma, that he brought up the opiate crisis. And I know we, moving forward as a county, talking about the opiate, but it's really a war on drugs. And we've lost that title because heroin and crack cocaine and those other drugs are still being utilized today at an imperative rate. So I would just like the term to kind of ease away from just an opiate and a point. If you're taking opiate, then we can get some help versus just saying all drugs. So just my kind of, so if we do some sort of policy or some sort of funding toward the war on opiate, it'd be the war on drugs. Thank you.
I'll just add to the comments about the opiate crisis or the war on drugs. I had an opportunity to meet recently with the administration, and they kind of laid out the game plan in this area, and we're doing a lot of things, but as everybody knows, we're still not moving the needle in the right direction, and I think that there's three things that we could be doing that we're not yet doing, and one is to have a rapid response system where when people survive an overdose, we immediately try to get them into treatment. And we're currently piloting that program in one Cleveland police district, but it's certainly not a widespread program. And the second is to have educational efforts being done in all of the schools throughout the county, and again, it's hit or miss. We're doing it in a few, but not widespread. And the third is to have a strong faith-based and community organization, deep grassroots effort to complement the media strategies that we're doing and really reach the people where they are. So there's a lot more that I think we can do, and I think it needs to get our attention not only during this budget crisis, but during the next year or two going forward. Anything else? Okay, well, I think that the comments of all of my colleagues taken together give us a pretty clear picture of what some of the major concerns are, and as the council president noted, this is also a very challenging budget, particularly with the change in federal policy on the Medicaid sales tax. So it is a real challenge. We're all going to have to work together, and look forward to working with the administration to come up with a plan where we can be financially responsible and at the same time effectively address as many of these needs and concerns and desires as we possibly can. With that, is there any miscellaneous business? Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If there being no further business before this committee, then the Committee of the Whole budget session is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your diligent participation.